Hey guys, I had an amazing podcast today, like incredible. And I can't wait till it's edited and we put it out there. I really shared about the big little lies of the C word. And I decided, I had said some things in there. And when you have those moments where you're just like, man, like that's it. And that's what I've been doing. And I need to talk about this more. I decided, I'm going to walk. Sometimes I think and move better. And I wanted to share like these 5 tools that I've used in my life. And I just never put them into this. I just never put them this way. And I started to share with it on the podcast. And then I started to kind of unpack it in my car. I do a lot of really good thinking, like when I'm working out, when I'm walking, when I'm in my car, like when I'm moving. It's like I got to move to think. So, one of the things, so there's just 5 things I want to share with you guys. One, on how to just transform your life, how to thrive, how to live, go from living small to living big, is number 1 is awareness. Okay. To me, this is like turning the lights on in a really dark room. And these are those like deep things that are inside your mind. You may not even be aware of it, right? Somebody says something. You watch a show. Maybe you even have an argument, right? Or your kids say something. Like kids are the best because they'll say something and like you think you've hidden stuff from people subconsciously or consciously. And then your kid says something. You're like, oh man, they know. And so, awareness is huge. That's the first step in understanding that there's something you need to look at in order to move forward. So this is all about moving forward, transforming your life, regardless of where you've been, regardless if anything big has happened, regardless of if you've had, a life-threatening illness or you're just getting started, right? You're a college kid and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to get started with my life. Like we tell ourselves stories and we get stuck. So number 1 is be aware. Listen, like pay attention to what somebody's saying to you, and that's what awareness is. Once we get to that point and we realize that there are some things we need to look at, so maybe it's that you, just have a sense of insecurity or you're gossiping about something, whatever it is, right? There's these things, you become aware of it. The second thing is to uncover it. And what I mean by that is it's really easy for us to become aware of something, a way we are, and then we own that story. So have you ever noticed, like there's people, and they'll say the same story, like, I'm just not really good at that, right? Or I'm just a worrywart, like I'm just a really worried person. And so that's the story loop that they tell themselves. Or maybe it's, I'm not somebody that likes to talk in front of people, or I'm not somebody that is, oh my God, I tripped. I just totally tripped. Don't walk and talk. Look, now I'm aware. Now I need to be aware of my surroundings. That was awesome. So, uncovering it, I almost view it as, when you're under the covers or something's under the covers and you kind of peek back and you kind of look in there. So you're like, all right, I see that I tell myself that story, that I'm an insecure person, that I'm a fearful person, that I'm worried all the time, whatever it is, whatever story you tell yourself. And then you own that story. So when people think about you, you've heard yourself say this, and you may not even be aware that like you say the same thing constantly, but then you have that loop in your head. And your brain literally begins to say, that's who you are. And it becomes this like Grand Canyon of truth in your mind. It's probably not true. You've just told yourself the story so many times. That's just the story that you believe about yourself. So when we start to uncover it, that's a choice, right? Because we can leave it in a spot where we go, I know that's how I am. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm fine with that. Like, this is just who I am. This is who I am. When we uncover it, we begin to make the choice to look at it. And I think when we choose to look at something like this, that's when we might go seek counseling. We might find a life coach. We might decide that this isn't really comfortable. Maybe we've gone through divorce and all of a sudden these things that have kind of laid dormant are now being uncovered. And sometimes, not even sometimes, I think a lot of times you can't unsee what you see, because now you've seen this. And so now it's a choice of like, can I pull back those covers more? Can I take a look at my shame, my guilt, my insecurity, my, my story I tell myself about finances, about what success looks like, about how I want to live my life, whatever it is. So after you've become aware, you've decided that you're going to uncover it, you've made the choice to uncover. The third thing is to discover. And so what is that? So to me, I was watching Game of Thrones. I didn't watch the series when it was on all these years. I watched it 2 months ago, and I watched it from beginning to end. And I watched it twice because if you've watched it, there are so many details. It's just a lot. So it's interesting because a lot of people who followed the series or who read the book, they really didn't like the ending. And I really loved the ending. And here's why, after having a couple conversations with people. There's a family called the Starks, just to give you guys context if you haven't seen Game of Thrones. And this family, at the very end of the movie, our hope, or the hope of a lot of people, is what I hear, is that they all go back to Winterfell, which is their home, and they live happily ever after, right? They're a family, they have Thanksgiving dinner together, they're like, sharing family responsibilities and raising kids, happily ever after. And here's what I loved about it, that they discovered their true self and what they really were meant for. And so Sansa always wanted to be in royalty. She wanted to be a princess. I'm going to just sit for a minute. She wanted the royal life. Like, she wanted that kind of thing. And so at the end of the movie, she stays in Winterfell, and she's kind of in charge of the North, okay? Jon Snow, the brother, ends up being banned to the Wall, which is a place where the Night's Watchmen go. And they make an oath that they don't get married and they don't have children and all that kind of stuff. And so because of that, a lot of people didn't like that. They thought he should stay. But I thought that is his true nature. He is a warrior. He was a fighter, right? Like, that's just what he was. If you watch the series, you know what I'm talking about. And finally, my favorite was Arya's story. Arya was wild from the time she was young, and her true spirit, her true self, was never to sit in the castle and be a lady. That's not what she was meant to do, right? She was meant to discover. To discover who she really was meant that she was going to the uncharted waters and to discover who she was and what's out there in the world. And so once we become aware of some of these things in ourselves and we make the choice to uncover it, then we can discover who we really are. We can make the choice to say, all right, I'm willing to go to this place and really discover the stories I'm telling myself and be willing to get feedback for it. I'm willing to discover who I am, and even when it's painful, even when it hurts to, look at maybe some of the things I don't like about myself, I learned to stop blaming others. I learned to put up boundaries. I learned to get real, get honest, be transparent, have courage. All of those things are part of discovering who you are. And, in that spot, that's where I hired like a life coach, and I worked with a counselor. And I think this is a really frightening stage, right? When we transition, we know, okay, this is who we are. Maybe we even uncover it a little bit more, take a deeper look at it, start telling ourselves that story. Choosing to discover our true self out of those stories is usually pretty painful. And I see a lot of people that I've met in my life that they don't want to go there, right? I know, but I don't. Oh my gosh, I almost got hit in the head by a butterfly. But I don't really want to accept certain things about myself. I don't really want to love certain things about myself. And so we shush those negative behaviors and emotions, and we tell ourselves that, yeah, that might be part of me, but I don't want to look at that. I want to look at my success. I want to look at, my marriage. Maybe that looks good. Maybe my kids. I want to find my value in maybe a habit or something that I'm doing well, like exercising or my body. And we choose to say, no, I don't want to look at that. I kind of stayed stuck there for a little bit, especially with cancer. I just wanted to be like, yeah, I had cancer. Let me move on. And it was only at the point that I really started to discover my true self, and cancer was part of that story. And I allowed those emotions like guilt and shame and sadness and grief, I allowed them to tell me their story. And when I started to allow that, I feel like my wholeness came back together. And it was a painful experience, I'm not gonna lie. So the next part, the fourth tool, is to recover and replace. So what does that mean? So recovering, when you look up the definition, it's basically to get back to a normal state of mind, body, strength, health, whatever it is. That's recovering, right? And so then you make the transition to go, okay, how do I get maybe back? But then maybe you find out that going back is not where you need to go. You need to go forward, right? So we can look at our past, we can say, this is the person I really liked, this is the person I want to be again. But it doesn't mean that you're going to be the same person. You're probably going to be a completely different version, but you can take some of those behaviors with you. So you recover some of those parts of yourself. Then you have to replace those lies, right? We all tell ourselves these lies, and as you've gone through some of this work, you start to realize that some of those lies have been programming, maybe from like the time you've grown up. It doesn't mean anybody's a bad person or your parents are bad people. It's just that maybe the environment you were around or the stories that you heard, you adopted. It became part of your programming. And you don't maybe want to live in that space. You don't want to live small. You want to live big. You want to go, here's who I truly am. How do I do this now? So you have to start replacing those lies, those stories, that programming with some new software. And, you have to get uncomfortable to become comfortable again, or get comfortable being uncomfortable. We say that at Orange Theory a lot, to really lean into the discomfort. That Brene Brown says, that really truly is a place where you start to battle sometimes with those thoughts in your head to replace those things, because that requires the change. And how I saw it in my life was, I felt like when you think of the Grand Canyon, right? It's like you could never jump the Grand Canyon. And so on the other side, on the one side, it was all my old stuff, my old thoughts, my old behaviors. Some of it I really loved. Like I really loved the person I was, BC, before cancer. But there were also some things there that I had to look at, and I had to, I couldn't unsee it because it was screaming in my face, right? Shame and guilt and insecurities that I had put at bay, that I really didn't want to discover too much, maybe just a little bit. I wanted to uncover it, didn't want to truly go down there and discover what was going on with that. I decided to really work on replacing those things. So as you work on those things, then you're able to get to the fifth, which is thriving. And when I had heard the news I had cancer, right? You go into that place of, and all of us do, and I don't mean this in a negative way, we're a victim of this disease. We feel very much like helpless, and what did I do wrong, right? You go through all these emotions, you feel very much victimized. I felt like my body betrayed me, all these different emotions that I went through. Then you come out, you go through your treatments, and mine was almost a year-long process from beginning to end. They ended up having to stop my chemo treatments at the end because my body couldn't handle it anymore. And so I got to the point where it was like, now I've survived. Like, I'm a cancer survivor. And I just didn't wear that well. Like, I thought, gosh, I don't know why, but the survivor tag just weighs me down. I don't want to just survive this. I don't want to just be okay with this. I want to know how I can thrive. And it's cool because the definition of thriving means to grow and flourish vigorously. So to thrive, something that's thriving isn't like slowly growing, like time, a little bit at a time. It's really stepping forward, right? It's, I just came from Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within. He talks a lot about taking massive action. That's what he says. And when you take massive action, you're not slowly growing, you're really jumping forward. And for me, it's been a slow growth. And I knew that I wanted to thrive. And so I had to really start making some big changes and things that were scary to me. It was safe to me to have a job that I thought, okay, this is safe and it's got benefits and it has, a steady 8 to 5, whatever it was. That's safe to me. And launching a business isn't safe. Deciding you're going to write a book, deciding you're going to speak, deciding you're going to start a podcast. All of that is like uncharted waters. And it's also the place that I had to jump into. And I think the more I've grown and the more I understand these 5 steps, the more I've been able to move forward and to thrive in my life and to just keep growing vigorously, because that's what I want to do. There's just so much our lives, there's so much we have in our lives, like from the time we're born, like we have so much to give, and we're programmed out of a lot of that. And then we get to a place where we stay small and we stay safe. And some of us are okay with that. It was funny because I got done with the podcast and Ed Milet was on Instagram and he was talking about this very thing about staying small. And I think he said I think it was like a 1% of us are willing to not be small and to live a big life. I don't remember all the details. I actually shared it on my Instagram story. But it was really an amazing awakening for me when I got in the car and I kind of saw that. I was like, oh my gosh, how funny, because I don't want to live a small life. Like, we all have so much to give the world. Like, the difference that we can make with all the gifts that you have, that I have, the abilities that I see and clients I have, and how often people have said to me, and I've said to other people, like, do you know the potential you have? Do you see how amazing you are? And you're like, oh, yeah. But inside, I don't think I really believe that. And that was the gift of the broken road for me. One of the gifts was being able to see all of the things that I needed to discover about myself and all the lies I needed to be replaced. So, guys, don't be afraid of those things inside that creep up in the darkness or creep up when you've gone through a hard time, or when something happens and we want to go, well, do you believe that person? Look at yourself, like, turn it around and be like, why does that affect me? Why am I so bothered that that person said this, did this, whatever? Look at yourself, and what is it in yourself that needs to change first and foremost, because that's where you start thriving. It's not about looking outside. It's literally about changing your mirror, changing the mirror from the inside out, truly. Like, that's why that's my tagline for my fitness and nutrition business, because we literally have to change our mirror, look at ourselves. And so catch yourself. Just catch yourself this week. I'd be so interested, private message me or whatever. What are the things that you notice that people say, do, whatever, and then you're just like, and we don't take a second to be aware of why that would bother us. So step 1 is aware. 2nd, uncover. 3rd, discover. 4, recover and replace. And 5, thrive. All right, I hope you guys have an awesome day. See you later.